1963, African leaders met in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, to establish the Organization of African Unity. At this meeting, all of African leaders were present, except for one, Sylvanus Olympio. He had been assassinated. This event marks the beginning of a new sequence in Africa. Coup. This is a story of coup in West Africa. In 1963, Togo President Sylvanus Olympio was shot dead by a group of ex-soldiers led by Sergeant Iadema. The military handed power over to Nicholas Grunitzky. 4 years later, Iadema overthrew Grunitzky in a coup and assumed the presidency. In 1968, a coup was staged against the government of Modibo Keïta. The coup was led by Moussa Touare, who proclaimed himself president and ruled the country until he was deposed in 1991 by Amadou Touré. Touré then handed power over to Alpha Conakry after elections in 1992. Touré then became the second elected president of Mali in 2002, but his government was overthrown in 2012, forcing him into exile. Touré was replaced by Ibrahim Keïta in 2013, but was forced to resign in 2020 in another coup. Sékou Touré ruled Guinea from independence in 1958 until his death in 1984. On April 3, 1984, the army carried out a coup. The military leader Lassana Conté became president. Conté remained in power until his death in 2008. After his death, Moussa Camara seized power in the coup. Camara will remain in power until elections in 2009. After elections, Alpha Condé became president. In 2020, Conté election to a third term was challenged by opposition who accused him of fraud. Conté claimed a constitutional referendum allowed him to run despite the two-term limit. On September 5, 2001, a coup was staged by Mamadou Demouya, who declared that President Conté's government has been dissolved. In 1966, a series of protests led to the resignation of Yamiyango and brought Lamizana to power. Lamizana will remain in power for 14 years, and on November 25, 1980, Zé Zepro overthrew Lamizana. 2 years later, Zepro was overthrown by Jean-Baptiste. In 1983, Jean-Baptiste was removed in a coup. That coup brought Thomas Sankara to power. In 1984, Sankara changed the country name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso. In 1987, Sankara, along with other officials, died in the coup organized by Blaise Compaoré. Compaoré will rule Burkina Faso from 1987 to 2014. For the first 14 years after independence, Niger was run by a single-party system under the presidency of Hamani Diori. A combination of economic difficulties and accusation of corruption and mismanagement resulted in a coup that overthrew the Diori regime. The coup was staged by Seni Kochi. Kochi will rule the country until his death in 1987. In 1993, Hamani Ousmane became the first president of the Second Republic. In 1996, he was deposed in the coup by Ibrahim Menazara. Ibrahim Menazara was assassinated at Yema Airport on April 9, 1999. For more than a century, Liberia was ruled on a single-party system in which the same party, the Chu Wayne Party, held office. On April 12, 1980, a group of soldiers led by Samuel Doe stormed the executive mansion and killed the president, William Tauber. Doe will go on to rule Liberia for 10 years, and on Christmas Eve 1989, a group of rebels crossed into northern Liberia. They were the members of the newly formed National Patriotic Front of Liberia, headed by Charles Taylor. On April 9, 1990, Doe was captured and killed by Prince Johnson. In 1963, Christopher Soglo overthrew the government of Herbert Maga. Soglo government was later overthrown in 1967 by a group of junior officers led by Maurice Kunundite. In 1970, after years of political instability, including multiple coups and failed elections, a presidential council was formed, including Haber-Maga, Apete, and Tomate. In 1972, Kariki seized power in the coup. Kariki would hold power for 18 years. In 1991, he was defeated in the elections by his prime minister, Nicéphore Soglo. Benin then became the first African state in which an opposition won an election. In 1967, Shaka Stephen became the Prime Minister of Sierra Leone. Within hours of taking office, he was ousted in the coup by David Lassana. David Lassana was later removed by Andrew Smith, who was also removed by John Bangura. In 1968, Bangura returned power to Shaka Stephen, who would go on to rule Sierra Leone for 18 years. In 1985, Joseph Momo was elected president. On April 30th, 1992, Finance Strategy staged a coup and Joseph Momo fled to Guinea. In 1996, Afghanistan was removed by Julius Biya. Biya would serve as head of state to election in March. After election, Amon Kaba became president. 3 months later, Paul Koroma staged a coup and Kaba also fled to Guinea. Koroma was later removed by ECOMOG, and on March 10, 1998, Kaba returned to Freetown after 9 months in exile. The man who led Ghana to independence, Kwame Nkrumah, was the first prime minister and later president of Ghana. Nkrumah went on to develop Ghana, and his achievements were remarkable. But in 1961, Nkrumah shifted his focus from a free market economy to the creation of a socialist state. In 1966, Nkrumah was removed in a coup by the armed forces. In 1969, the military handed power over to the civilians, but the civilians were later removed in 1972 by Colonel Anchempo. In 1978, Akafo overthrew Anchempo in another coup. Akafo would rule for less than a year, and in 1979, he was also removed by Jerry Rawlings in yet another coup. Rawlings had Anchempo and Akafo executed. Rawlings then handed power over to the politicians, but 3 years later he was back, staging a second coup in 1982. The hope that Nigeria would serve as a stronghold for democracy in Africa came to an end on January 15, 1966. A group of young army officers executed the country's top politician, the federal prime minister, Sir Abubakar Balewa, the premier of the north, Sir Ahmad Bello, the premier of the west, Chief Akindula. Daku brought General Harunzi to power. While on the tour of the country, Harunzi was arrested and assassinated. General Gowon became Nigeria's new head of state. In 1975, while attending an OAU meeting in Kampala, Gowon was overthrown by General Murtala. Murtala announced plans to return the country to civilian rule, but on his way to work in 1976, he was ambushed and assassinated. Olusegun Obasanjo became Nigeria's new head of state. After 13 years of military rule, Obasanjo returned Nigeria to civilian rule. In 1979, Shagari was elected president. In 1983, Shagari was overthrown and military rule was re-established under General Buhari from 1983 to 1985. Then Ibrahim Bamangila from 1985 to 1993, followed by Sani Abacha from 1993 to 1998. In 1998, a free and fair election brought Obasanjo to power as president. It was the first civilian government in Nigeria in 15 years.